You're listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense with your host, Doug Thorpe. Here's Doug.
Hello again, everyone. This is Doug Thorpe, and you're listening to another episode of Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about one aspect or one dimension of leadership, being able to tell a good and powerful story. And I think you're going to learn here that when we say that, I've got a little, yet again, a twist to that we're going to get into. My guest is a lady named Emily Schneider, and Emily is going to lead us through this journey. Emily, welcome to the show.
Thanks so much for having me, Doug. I'm excited to be here today.
Absolutely, and so happy to have you here. Emily and I met through a podcasting network that we're both a part of, and we've had great opportunities to talk about some things. But as is a little bit of a tradition here, Emily, give us a little bit of your backstory, your journey to land on the genius zone that you operate in today. What is that backstory in your?
Yeah, so I like to describe myself as a visual storyteller specializing in PowerPoint design. But obviously that's not where I started, especially because I didn't know what PowerPoint design was back in the day. But my first design piece, or the thing that pivoted my whole career, was my Sweet 16 invitation. Quirky fonts, questionable font choices, or color choices, I should say. But it wasn't about necessarily what that piece looked like, except for now I can look back and say I've had exponential growth in terms of how far I've come from my design skills and my knowledge around being a strategic visual storyteller. But what it was, and what I now can look back and say, it's all about the way that I'm able to help somebody feel and connect with a piece of work. And when I can help people, create that emotional connection, feel more confident, feel more joyous about what they're doing and what they're saying, that is what my sweet spot is. I always love helping people shine bright. And when I get to do that and then help somebody else illuminate even more, it's just the cherry on the top. So I use PowerPoint as the tool, but I help businesses synergize and simplify their information. My magical knack, again, is simplifying the complexity into telling a really dynamic story so that leaders, presenters, the speakers can guide that conversation and ultimately drive business decisions and make an impact to move that forward.
Well, I love that theme, and that's why your body of work made sense to me, because as most of my listeners know, and people that have followed my blog, and even those that have subscribed to my coaching, we talked a lot about leaders needing to create clarity. And one of my taglines that I like to follow is "A confused mind says no." That's a cheap ripoff from the sales world, but anybody that's been to one of the high-end sales programs has heard some variety of that. But I think it applies to leadership. And if you're in leadership and your people are confused, you're not going to get a lot done. And it is that psychology that says, if I'm not sure where I'm supposed to go, I'd rather do nothing than do something wrong. So I'm not going to do anything. And it's that lack of clarity that can so often get us bogged down. The second element that you packed in there is this notion of we are somehow in the rapid pace of change, whether you blame it on technology or blame it on just social norms or whatever. We are seeing change happening around us at a breakneck pace, but often what is also going on, there's an ever increasing complexity of our work problems around us. And so often I meet an executive who says he needs help getting more from his team, his or her team. And when we start talking, they immediately dive in the deep end with jargon and acronyms and phraseology and a lot of. And I'm sure people that work at that organization, that firm, are supposed to know these things, but it's like, can you say that in plain English? Can you describe point A to point B? Where do you want your people to go? And a lot of times that's almost there's this. You can hear the brakes screeching and the airbags going off. They don't know how to do that. They like hit the light pole when you challenge them that way. So what do you run into with executives when they say they want your help clarifying and cleaning up their story? What are some of the usual pitfalls that you immediately see?
Yeah, no, I think it goes back to kind of what you were saying before. I always preach simplicity and consistency, right? Our brains have this magical power of telling our own stories, of creating their own thoughts. And with visuals, we actually are able to retain 65% more information. So there's so much power in having a strong, well-designed presentation because, to your point, it allows that clarity and it usually drives that simplicity as well. So I run into the same thing. People usually have too much to say on a single slide, or they think that over communication makes them, it tends to be where they default, right? But usually what I find is, and with my process, and I have a minimum number of days required from kickoff to final delivery for that purpose, because it allows somebody the time to digest and to really process their work. So I'm all about helping people create that clarity, simplify, really honing in on what are the key takeaways, not only from an overall story or a presentation standpoint. What do you want your audience to know and do and feel at the end? We have to start with that in mind right at the beginning, not only so that they know what they're there for, but also so you as a presenter have some kind of direction, but also then breaking it down to slide by slide. Slides should only tell so much. We only have as a presenter, you can talk and talk, but your slides should be the support. They should be kind of the background music to what you're saying. And so when you can simply break that down, your audience will follow along. And to your point, you can guide them where you want them to go. And you can really highlight and emphasize the key takeaways or the key things that they need to know to make their decision. So again, simplicity and consistency, I find that people over communicate, they overshare. It can be as simple as telling all the data points in a slide or all the dates, but the dates aren't necessarily important. It's what happened. It's the trends that we see. And if we can visually highlight those, the audience understands the story you're saying. And so I work with my clients to really talk about slide intention, the amount and the content that is on a slide. I don't write it, but I'll help streamline it. And then also bringing in those visual consistencies and cues, whether it's color, whether it's the way photography is treated, enhancing and elevating layouts so that our eyes stay within that slide, but can help support the voiceover or the story that is being told. Again, my ultimate goal is to help my client become that thought leader. That I use the term conversation conductor, just like in an orchestra, as a conductor, right, lays the music. They tell each instrument when to play and how loud and how fast, right? And everybody has the same music, but they work together to create this beautiful harmony. That's the whole point of what a leader does with a strong designed presentation is they create the cadence. They're telling the slides, they're flipping through, they're creating that harmonious music in the background, and the audience is able to feel that and to follow along. So in the end, you're driving them to the right choices or to the right conversation and the right questions. That's the biggest thing, is we want to engage in the right conversations and not be confused by too much information or lack of. So I think it's a beautiful dance that we figure out together.
Yeah. I know I've seen some of the more entertaining TED Talks I've watched are those who have brought slide decks and they're making a joke of the slide deck process and the classic phrase, death by PowerPoint. And so many people talk about meetings and they get called to an hour-long meeting and they realize there's a 90-page deck involved. And you're going, wait a minute, let's do the math on this. We have less than a minute
Right.
per slide, 45 seconds per slide. And then you flip the first slide and it's just, it reads like the, Gutenberg Bible. And you're like, wait a minute, how am I going to do this? And there's that immediate move to brain start shutting down, eyes start glazing over, and, can you even hear what the speaker is talking about?
Right. And I think it goes back to and the beautiful part about having a presentation or the ability to talk to somebody is to engage in a conversation, to open up the floor so that they're listening to you, but you're also listening to them, and you're working with your audience to feel what's happening, right? You're not just talking at them, you're talking with them. I always, I just recently heard that presentations are kind of that middle space between like an ad campaign and a video, because an ad campaign is something that's just shouted at you, right? Marketing is a conversation of one to many. I don't know where you are. I don't know what you're doing, but I'm hoping that my message resonates with you. And video or something, a little bit more intimate, allows you to feel a lot more. It's more dimensional. Where a presentation is that middle ground. So you have the space, you have the personal connection. And when you have the right slides and that right story behind you, you really do create that harmonious experience. And I think sometimes it's even more impactful than a video or something with music, because you're creating that authentic connection. And I would think that I've heard, and I would believe that you might agree that, a sales conversation is a one-to-one personal connection. It's a conversation. And when you can have that, you create that trust, that credibility, that accountability, and that allows, again, for somebody to say yes, to believe you and to buy in. And in the end, that's what business is all about, is creating that trust so that we can move forward and do the right things.
Yeah. So often difficult. When Emily and I were meeting and preparing for this, I shared with her a story that I encountered many years ago in my consulting life. I was asked to be a program lead of a very large engagement that had several hundred consultants involved. And when I would go to my client meetings for status updates and report out, my deck was basically 6 pages. I had a template and a format that I thought could hit all of the elements of the project status. But my client had an internal culture and tradition. Usually when they had a meeting, it was death by PowerPoint, and they would want to have 30, 40, 50 pages in their decks that they would want to go through, and they all had to be graphically right and so on and so on. And as the project began unfolding, they kind of tolerated my skimpy little 6-page deck. But then finally I got challenged on it. How can you stand up to the client side when their team has 60 pages and you've got 6? And my famous question back to them was, what did you miss in my deck?
Yeah.
What does my deck not tell you that you need to know? If you can name something for me that you feel is lacking or missing, I will certainly be happy to expand to accommodate that. But otherwise, this is all you're ever going to get from me. And
Totally.
it was a hard culture, wall to break through, to prove that you could accomplish great things with pointed, thinner information.
Yeah. Well, less is more. Again, I think sometimes when we're not as confident, when we don't believe in what we're presenting, we over communicate, or we overdo it, or we repeat ourselves again and again. And then again, you don't look as credible or as trusted or as knowledgeable. But when it's simple, and when you're eloquent in what you're using and how you're putting that story together, you really do allow somebody to listen. And our brain spans and our attention is limited. And so if you can keep somebody engaged in 6 slides and get them all the information they want, isn't that such a bigger win? To your point, like, death by PowerPoint is what we're all used to. So if you can challenge that norm, you've really already won, because somebody's looking at you differently and saying, oh, I remember that resonates with me. I know what I needed to take away. Is usually, if not, they're overwhelmed. And when we're overwhelmed, we shut down, right?
So let me ask you this. I'm thinking of a big segment of my own market. I do a lot of work with mid-sized and smaller private businesses that maybe they've got a team of 10 or 15 or 20, but it's no bigger than that. And the owners have information they want to share. They've got stories and updates they want to bring. Should they be worrying about creating a deck of some sort to help facilitate the messaging?
I always say that, like, again, I'm such a visual person, but I think visuals have such power to connect us and to tell our story and to make an impact. And it can be as simple as, creating a really strong diagram, laying something out a little differently. Yes, when you have a key visual, it could be a 1-pager. I've helped clients with simple things that are even just emailed, because the power of having a process or a story or a data point really highlighted properly makes such an impact and engages somebody else to then get curious, or to ask the right question, or to make that decision. And it does help, for sure. I think there's so much power in that visual support to our stories. We have so much in our head. And the only way I think that I found, again, as a visual as a visual creative thinker that when we can have something that we both can see at the same time, we really start to align that. If not, what I'm thinking about, the way I describe something is going to look so different than the way you're thinking about it. Even when I say the color purple, right? Like there's so many shades of the color purple. And so I think it's really important that we start to bring those together or put that out on paper, in a slide deck so that we all are aligned
Yeah.
on the same thing.
Well, what comes to my mind in that scenario with the smaller business is even if the one pager or two pager or whatever that you're trying to get across, maybe it does have a diagram or some image of the message there, but even if you then expand on it with, bullet points about what you're trying to communicate, because for those people on the team that may be more textual, they got to see it in print to understand it. If you kind of blend both of those together in your messaging, then that becomes the memorial to that message. And so either having it in their hand or having it electronically at their disposal, they can go back to it as a reference point and say, oh yeah, I remember on Monday, boss said do this, and here's what this is about. And it can facilitate that perpetuation of the basic message and keeping that clarity alive.
Yeah, and I think it helps also just create alignment, right? Because if not, it becomes a little bit of a hearsay. Like, I thought you said this, but you said that. And so when we can get stuff written down and again, agreed upon, or that we both see the same thing, it's easier to remember or to go back to your point. And I'm always a component of visuals. Again, I think visually. That's how I learned that I from an early age, that's how I looked at the world, was I broke things down or I saw it in visual space. And so it definitely helps me for sure.
Yeah. Well, and you raise a great point, and I don't know what the statistics are. I don't know that I've ever seen the study, but common knowledge is, and I know the people that work on training and development materials talk about this. There are those among us that are totally visual. There are those that are totally textual. You can draw all the pictures you want all day long, but they're not going to get it unless they see it in print. They see a list or a paragraph explaining what it is, and then there's those that are a little bit in between. They kind of enjoy both of them to help them clarify. So I think being sensitive to that, and purely from a leadership standpoint, I'll make a point that if you're a leader of a team or an organization, you need to figure out who your people are. If your whole team is visual, but you are textual, writing a 2-page email is going to just totally miss the mark with your team if you can't draw some of those pictures or create the visuals, and vice versa. If you're, totally visual and all you do is draw pictures, if you've got textual people on your team, they're going to be like, I don't get it. I don't see it. So it's incumbent on the leader to know a little bit, learn a little bit about who their people are and what medium might work the best for them. But I do like the idea of when you've got an announcement to make or a message or a directive or a program that you're trying to promote, giving your people the help of something tangible that they can look at and see that can resonate with them is really part of it. I say all that to say I'm sure that at the start, and I might have already lost some listeners along the way when we uttered the magic word PowerPoint, there was like this click,
Sure. Hey, let him go.
And I certainly hope that's not the case, but those of you that might have been tempted to do that as we're talking here, please pay heed to what I just said about the value of it. And whatever tool you may choose to use, the whole objective is, how can you as a leader create better clarity for your people to operate and have as their guide rails or their way forward, so that they understand what good work is going to look like.
Yeah. And I always find too, like when I work with my clients, right, we don't know what we need until we start to like really put it out there. And so sometimes, again, when we keep things in our head or we just send them as emails or just in words, you miss a lot. And so when you can kind of have that combination, and that's where PowerPoint is amazing, because you can have the bullets and you can have the visuals. You can kind of answer both or hear aligned to both needs or all needs of your team, it really does help to synergize, and it makes everybody feel heard and feel seen. And again, it just allows people to feel more empowered to do the work, or to listen, or to be on board to where things are going. I think when we're kind of bored, or we shut that off, right? When we lose that engagement, it's really hard to bring somebody back in. So that's why I love what I do, because it helps people connect better with others in simple ways. And it doesn't have to be overdone, to your point. Like, it could be a one pager, it could be part of an email, it could be the way, making sure headlines or color is used synergy. Color is used systematically throughout a presentation to guide somebody along. That simpleness of every time I talk about one topic and using a color, well, that really helps breaking up space. So it's not just all white. That really helps us digest information better. And I think that goes across any type of kind of learning strategy.
It's interesting you say that. I was thinking in my early career, I was a banker, and I was working for a large, fairly successful regional bank. And one of the cultural traditions we had, there was a bank officer meeting every Friday morning, and anybody in the bank that was an officer that was available needed to be at that meeting at 8 o'clock Friday morning. And there was a slide deck that always came with it, and it was typically the same 4 or 5 key slides looking at some of our operating metrics and target areas. But the interesting nuance they had chosen, and I don't know who was the author of this, but they had chosen to simply, the background was black and the letters were yellow. And there were no other visuals. It was text and on the screen there. And at first you kind of, I know I had the impression, it took me a while to kind of get used to that. It was kind of like, why are we doing that? But over time, it kind of sunk in, and it was, I don't know, there was something magically powerful about that contrasting combo. And later, about 4 iterations in my career forward, I was doing some independent business development work, and we had engaged a marketing firm to help us build a logo for this enterprise. And lo and behold, after talking through everything, they came to us with a black and yellow color combo for this logo, and I immediately said, "Oh my God, here I go again. How does that?" But then they started explaining some of the mental aspects of that particular driver, how that combination drove certain things that directly related to what we were trying to build as a brand and promote as a brand. And the more I got to looking at it, I thought, damn, that is good. That looks really good,
Yeah, I mean, there's so much like psychology behind colors and meanings and what they do and how they have and make us move or behave. I mean, that's one of the things I love about being a presentation designer, is just the psychology, or this, understanding how our brain digests information and how we interpret it. And yes, color is huge in our world. I think it's interesting when you start to even think about how newspapers are and how color comes in, or how comics are treated so differently than the rest of the newspaper. There really is such power in such simple things. Again, simplicity and consistency really do drive so much of how we can communicate with each other and create those better connections.
So you alluded earlier when we began talking about a process that you've got when you first engage with a client. Do you mind sharing some of the steps and elements in that process?
Oh, no, of course. So my process with my clients is really about just getting to know them. So I always kick everything off with having them walk me through their story, whether it's fully baked or just kind of white papered. Because I think it's so important to understand what they're going to say and how they're going to say it and what those key points are. And then from there, we work together to really craft and hone in on what are those aspects per slide. So again, I come in, my clients usually already understand who their audience is. I'll challenge them or just make sure that I know what they're looking to do, what the goal of this meeting is, right? And also, they also usually know what their delivery style is, if it's going to be a webinar, if it's going to be in person, if it's just an email, what that medium is, because that's important to know how we're setting this up. And then we come in, and once their story is crafted, again, they'll walk me through it. I always help to refine it so that they know you start with the end in mind, then you go through the sequence of beginning, middle, and end, right? You set the scene, you kind of, the middle really is where the all the heart of that conversation or that presentation is. It's where the tension is. You talk about the problems or the growth or the opportunities. And then the end is really where you drive home that impact. You open the floor, you create that engagement with the audience. Once we kind of have that story outlined, is where the magic comes in from a visual standpoint. I look at it again from a slide totality or from a story totality and an individual slide totality. We talk about slide intention, we talk about copy, and we talk about the visuals. Slide intention really, again, I don't mean to be a broken record, but it's about simplicity. It's about focusing on those key details. It's about sticking to the main points. And again, it's all about aligning to your overall goal and what you want your clients or your audience to do at the end. And then it's really about balancing the visuals and the story, the content and the story. Like we said, everybody learns a little different, but we do know that there's power in having a balance. Too much copy is never gonna resonate well. You can have just a visual, you can have a full picture on a screen if it supports your story. That's amazing, actually. People really resonate with that. When you think about text or the content on your slide, again, it's about using it sparingly. It's limiting the amount of words, even the bullets or the way you treat them. Think them more of headlines, of really short, crisp things. We don't remember sentences, we remember short bits. So how do we make things more memorable and impactful? And you want, again, that it's not all the words you're saying. It shouldn't be a slide that you're not reading from it. It should just be the support of those key takeaways. And it should help you focus that attention. And that can be done, again, when you add in design. It's about highlighting text. It's about using bold. Simply, sometimes I'll find clients who have their logos all over the place or who headlines aren't usually treated in the top left corner. We read from left to right, top to bottom. So when we can lay things out in the way that that people digest it, it's so much easier for us to stay engaged. And then one of my favorite parts that I always come in is understanding your image style. Again, whether that be data, whether that be charts, whether that be infographics, photography, illustrations. Setting a tone is so important. What is the energy? What is the mood? What is the vibe you need? And then sticking to that. If you have a style of photography, stay with it. Try and find images that feel aligned, that feel like they're telling a story. Again, think about a picture book. You don't have all these different types of photography thrown into a story or illustration styles. You pick one and you lead with it. Again, our brains work really well when we can create that synergy throughout. So, and that comes with data and charts and stuff as well. So yeah.
Well, what strikes me is, as you describe all of that, there are elements of all of this that aren't too far removed from good marketing. And I think about, I had the privilege a few episodes ago, I interviewed a guy named Steve Robinson. He was the chief marketing officer at Chick-fil-A when they landed the cow campaign. And, if you've paid any attention to the restaurant chain Chick-fil-A, their storyline has to do with cows, holding up signs that say, eat more chicken. It's self-preservation of the cow, right? Don't eat beef, eat chicken. Yeah. And it's brilliant. It's a brilliant visual marketing campaign that took all kinds of legs and, turned into live characters at sporting events and all kinds of things along the way. But it's a fascinating story. But I think it gets back to that whole idea, when you zero in on the message you're really trying to get across, the visuals, the simple text that you might pick, all of that packed together, it's really not too different from good, powerful marketing. And as a leadership tool, having the ability to convey that story and that message in an impactful way, a memorable way, like you said, I think is so incredibly powerful. So when people in roles of authority are asking, well, how can I be more impactful? How can people remember what I'm trying to tell them? Surprise, surprise, folks, we're talking about it right now.
Yeah, I have one of my favorite quotes actually is put effort into the simple things. That's the magic, right? The more simple we can make things, the more the more we can be straightforward and clear, it really does. That's where the power is.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, Emily, this has been great. I think we're going to wrap up for today, but tell people the best way to get a hold of you.
Yeah, thanks so much, Doug. It's been awesome to chat with you. You can find me on my website at IamEmilySchneider.com. I'm also super active and always love connecting on LinkedIn.
Awesome. Well, as always, folks, we're going to have that information in the show notes. You can hop down, click Emily's links there, and hop over and learn more about her work and get in touch with her if you want to do that. But one last time, Emily, thank you.
Thanks so much, Doug. Have a great day.
It's been a pleasure. And folks, I do like to remind you, if you're listening on your favorite streaming service, we do have a video version of this show over on YouTube, channel by the same name, Leadership Powered by Common Sense. Hop over there, leave us a note, drop me a line if you or someone you know would be a good guest on this show. Always willing to entertain that kind of referral. But for now, I'm going to sign off, say goodbye. Go out there and make it a great day.
You've been listening to Leadership Powered by Common Sense, hosted by Doug Thorpe. If you would like to know more about the coaching and advisory services he provides, visit dougthorpe.com.